Ed Ingram, Dalton Risner. Who's hot, who's not? Let's dive into it. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day each and every day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Today on the show, this is like our film day, right? It's Wednesday, and I would usually go over a number of insights that I found from the tape, but I really wanted to hone in on one thing this week, and that's what I did. Ed Ingram, Dalton Risner. Dalton Risner gets the start in place of Ed Ingram for the first time in Ingram's career. He is healthy and not playing. This is would have been the 42nd start. So for 41 games, Ed Ingram was good enough. For some reason, on the 42nd one, he wasn't. So based on Kevin O'Connell's comments, based on what we saw on the tape, we can hopefully piece together a story for why this happened, what the expectation is for Dalton Risner, and if he is exceeding it so far. Here's what you're not going to get today. I'm going to get this right out of the way. You're not going to get like a strong, super binary take. I'm not going to come in and say, no, it should be Ed Ingram. No, it should be Dalton Risner. I think that's an overly simplistic way to do it. I'm going to go into a lot of detail about O-line technique. Hopefully you're going to learn something today. It's kind of the whole thesis of Locked On Vikings. And you'll be able to come up with your own ideas for at least what to look for the next couple. And so here's the situation as it stands. Dalton Risner got his first start against the Tennessee Titans. The way that O'Connell described this decision was he said something to the effect, Dalton Risner was healthy, so let's get him in there. Let's take a look. That's the way he kind of sold it. So we didn't really sell it as we were sick and tired and fed up and, we needed to get a better guard in there, right? We've heard coaches say that kind of thing when they do benchings, right? But no, it was Risner's healthy. We want to get a look. That was the sugar-coated nice way that he put it. And he also made sure to mention that this isn't going to be a week-to-week decision. So we're not looking at this Titans game and then deciding if we're going to buy into another one of Dalton Risner. Risner sounds like he's going to start now for the next couple. And whether that's 3 or 4 weeks total, then they'll probably make a decision about the group as a whole, the position as a whole for the rest of the season, so that they will know that they have their best right guard out there going into the playoffs. That seems to be the strategy here. Give Risner a little bit of run to get into the swing of things, to get used to it, see what you like, and then make a call. So we got a couple weeks to work with here. So the way I'm going to do this is separate it into pass and run. Pass pro and run blocking, two very much different skills, right? And I'm going to guess that the most exposure that you have to this, if you even have any, is looking at PFF grades or the people who have reported the PFF grades and noticing that Dalton Risner's pass blocking grade is better than his run blocking grade and Ed Ingram is the other way around. And I think a lot of people want Risner to go in because pass is bigger than run, so let's put the pass guy in and not the run guy in. That's very overly simplistic. I've given my PFF grade thing on here a lot before, but I'll do it again for anybody who's new or who just hasn't heard that particular thing before. But for me, it's kind of like going to the back of the book and looking up the answers. Not only are the answers not necessarily correct, and I'm not going to go and say, they don't know anything, they don't know what they're talking about, blah, blah, blah. That's not really my point here. But rather, you're never going to learn how to do the math problem if you're always going to the back of the math textbook. And I think it's a much more productive way to approach this to try to understand the concepts. Like a PFF grade might tell you how good they think he is, but they can never tell you why. They can't tell you what he does. They can't tell you what this player struggles with, what kinds of blocks they're better at or worse at. They will divide everything into run and pass. Their grades will adjust for difficulty on things like, they'll downweight rollout plays or, they'll grade screens on a different kind of curve, but they won't adjust for nuances like blocks to your outside versus to your inside, which is going to come up today. outside versus inside. That's going to be a thing. And if you get a team that likes to go further to the outside, that likes to rush from the outside because that's the kind of player that they have, or they want to put their nose tackle over on that side and rush from the inside, you're going to get teams that approach this differently. And actually the Jags and Titans, the two games we're going to really examine today, had exactly that difference. And it makes for a totally different environment. You're setting up differently, you're using different steps, and you're using different kinds of blocks. And so that creates a different environment that a PFF grade just will not adjust for, because to add all that stuff in would introduce so much noise that it would ruin all of the math that PFF wants to do with their grades. I'll also mention that single game PFF grades, even people at PFF, don't really stand by those as a thing you should rely on. They're too small of a sample for that system to really give you the conclusions that you think that it's giving you. So whenever I get a question that's like, why was somebody's grade like this in this game? You can almost always answer, I don't know, they're a weird single game, and like pretty much get away with that. But beyond all that and the processes that they use and my issues with those processes, it's just not really a nuanced thing. You're taking a very complicated, beautiful, detailed game and boiling it down to a scale of 0 to 100, a sliding scale, a spectrum, a binary. It's not good enough. So I don't like to use it. And I'm not even going to tell you what the grades are for these games. Get it out of your head. Just forget about it, and let's try to go from absolute 0 here. We will compare two games of a guard and decide how we feel who is better. And I can tell you, I can reassure you that the Jacksonville game for Ed Ingram was pretty representative of how his whole career has been. Like, all the same things happen. So we're not getting a particularly weird game or any kind of outlier or anything like that. Like, that was a pretty median game for him, I think. If you are more of a visual learner, by the way, you can go to patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL, where I broke down film. And I also have an article coming out soon on Wide Left with a lot of this same information, but with actual clips and write-ups. And so depending on how you like to consume this kind of information and how you learn best, there's a lot of different options out there for you. But if you are an audio listener and that's what you want to do, or if you're watching on YouTube or whatever, here we go. So let's start with Pass Pro. And the issue with Ed Ingram has to do, I think it's all the way to mentality. I don't think it's like a technique thing that you just have to like quick clean up. The way that Ed Ingram plays offensive line is just conducive to this mistake. And it's something that you kind of could know about when you bought into him in the first place, when you drafted him in the first place, and you kind of just decide to take it. So here's the deal with Ed Ingram. Across all things run and pass, he's a very, very, very aggressive player. And on O-line, mean, aggressive, nasty, all things we usually like pretty good, right? In Ed Ingram's case, that aggression can take him too far and can take him out of position and take him into places where he then has to play the recovery game. So in Pass Pro, he ends up on the recovery game a lot. And that can be okay. You can wash a guy past the QB. He might clip a yard, within a yard of the QB and get charted as a pressure or whatever. But that can be absolutely an okay way to live. But it's a little bit of a scrambly way to live, right? It's a little bit kind of improvisation. It's a little out of control. But the whole point of Ed Ingram is that you want a mean, nasty, aggressive guy. And you see that in the run. You see him, knock guys over. We've seen him just earhole dudes and like look for work situations. That aggression is the point of Ed Ingram. It's the thesis of Ed Ingram. So keep that in mind as we talk about what he does in Pass Pro. But his issue in Pass Pro is, I think, an inside out versus outside thing. When you have, and we're talking alignment, right? So think about the two alignments that he'll see most commonly. You'll see somebody either to his left or to his right, right? You'll see a one tech, or call it a 2-eye, which is obviously, the degree of difficulty there is a little bit different depending on what kind of thing you're getting, but a guy to your inside or a guy to your outside, right? A one tech or a 3 tech. When there is a one tech, he really likes to take the fight right to you. He likes to, either do a shuffle step, not like a true slide to the outside or a kick to the outside unless the protection itself dictates that. And it's like a slide protection, or when it's like a rollout, things are different. But he likes to take a really aggressive step. I know it as a short set. I've heard it as other things, but it's essentially a 6-inch step forward, and you just kind of like, like it's like rhythmic. It's bump, bump. And you take your inside foot, you step forward, outside foot, step forward. Your feet are now even. You're on a nice, easy, balanced, like a balanced base, and you're able to essentially take the fight to somebody. And if you want to, you get a little width with that step and try to really square up with somebody, you really can. One of the sort of core principles that you're looking for here is the half-man relationship. That is, from the D-line perspective, they only want to attack half of you, right? Because half of you is going to be easier to beat than all of you. O-line wants all of you because they want to be able to use all of their own strength, right? So kind of playing brick breaker with it and shuffling back and forth is like half the battle here. And if they get into a half-man relationship with you, you have to play that a little bit differently, and it can be sort of difficult. So he likes to short set in those situations, especially on quick game, which a lot of linemen love to short set on quick game. If the ball's going to be out quickly, I don't need to worry about your depth, and I don't need to worry about basically any pass rush that goes out and wide. I don't have to worry about stunts. Those take too long. I don't have to worry about all kinds of things because the ball's going to be out immediately. I literally just have to set up and make sure you don't run right through me and get to the quarterback immediately, right? And so that, again, leads to really aggressive pass sets. And if they get countered, they look really ugly, but he knew that the ball was going to be out quick on a 3-step drop. So he just kind of had to set himself up so if he loses slow. And losing slow is okay on quick game. Everybody will tell you that. That's part of it. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in terms of all this technique stuff before I get into the real outside arm issue that Ed Ingram has without like laying a whole bunch of that foundation. Okay, so that's going to be what we get into next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. It's been my favorite way to do a little something extra on games like Steelers-Browns Thursday night that I have absolutely no stake in otherwise. But maybe you put in a PrizePicks lineup and you got something to watch for, especially if you're like me and your traditional fantasy football season was over a long time ago. This week on PrizePicks, you can grab something like, for example, in that game, you can put something in like George Pickens to get more than 56.5 receiving yards, and maybe you think Jerry Jeudy will get less than 46.5 receiving yards. You put that in. If you get them both right, you win that lineup. You can win up to 100 times your money. You can get up to 6 players in there and win a whole bunch, not to mention their demons and their goblins, which are non-standard payouts. But you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks. So go check it out. Download the app today, and you can use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode is also brought to you by Zbiotics. Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. So here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And it's that byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme that breaks this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. So if you want to go out, have a good time, not necessarily have to worry about that morning after punishment, go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL. You can learn more and get 15% off of your first order when you use code LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Moving on with this episode of Locked On Vikings. So let's get to the meat of this thing. Ed Ingram's major issue in pass pro. I think when there's a guy on his inside, he can short set to that guy, really take the fight to you. He can be strong, get his big old paws on you, grab on, hold on, you're good to go, right? That sort of A-gap thing doesn't come up nearly as often as the losses to the outside. If you are imagining an Ed Ingram, turnstile loss, it probably is through the B-gap, not the A-gap. So remember the aggression thing. Whenever you're rushing to the outside And especially if you're a 3 technique or even a 4-eye and you're lining up far to the outside of Ed Ingram, likely there's an edge rusher to the outside as well that's occupying Brian O'Neill, which widens him out and creates a whole bunch of space over there. So that means Ed Ingram's kind of he's got to get up and get over there for him to like really get this engagement. Otherwise, this 3 tech's just going to run right around him. And to help him cover that space, he will shoot his outside arm really early in the rep all the time. He does this on purpose. The point is he's trying to win with reach. He's trying to play very, very long and essentially get the first contact. Another principle of O-line that is as pervasive as low man wins is that the first hit wins. Whoever gets that first punch, that first impact onto somebody else will ruin their momentum, will start influencing their setup or whatever they were trying to do, and they're going to be the ones dictating the action. So Ed Ingram wants to dictate the action. So he wants to get his hand into your chest and make you do something you weren't planning to do about it. That's the whole goal here. And that is fine. That works out really great a whole bunch of the time. The problem is, especially veteran rushers and some of the really good ones that he'll see, right? DeForest Buckner killing him. Eric Armstead got him a couple of times on this in Jacksonville because Eric Armstead knows what he's doing, right? Like he's been around. Will be able to counter that outside arm. You really shoot that thing way out there and there's no defending it. There's no defending that outside arm. So you get somebody's arm on your elbow or your tricep and they lift it up, that arm is going to be defeated. Once you defeat that arm, you're in a troubled spot, right? Because that is essentially going to open you right up. They're going to blast right through you. They're going to get into the backfield. So there's a couple of ways that you can try to fix this. And Ed Ingram employs both of these. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do from this position. It's a bad position, but it's a recovery position. And if you've listened to if you're an everyday, or if you listen to Locked On Vikings a lot, you know that I see O-line as a recovery position, right? Everybody on O-line can win the reps where you've got a whole bunch of help to either side and you've got, all these different factors and it's quick game or it's a rollout or like all those are not what separate the men from the boys. What separates the men from the boys is the one-on-one where you're in a bad position. What do you do? Right? Or where somebody comes at, it's a one-on-one, but they're contain rushing or whatever. They bull rush you and you can anchor. A lot of O-line in the NFL can anchor a bull rush, right? But not everybody can get put into a bad position and then claw their way out of it. And you can make a living like this. Christian Darrisaw does. I mean, Christian Darrisaw, he'll risk getting into a bad position specifically because he knows that he's really good at recovering from it, and in actually a very similar way that Ed Ingram does. So Ed Ingram's favorite move, I think, in this one is to take his upfield foot, usually his outside foot, right? To take his outside foot and throw it back behind him to essentially get his hips realigned to the outside or even facing up past the quarterback and wash that guy up past the quarterback. So, okay, you want to blast through the B gap? Okay, but you're going to stay in that B gap. You're never actually going to get to where the quarterback is. To me, that's perfectly fine. You wash that guy up past the QB, that's a win. In fact, a lot of tackles live like that. Cam Robinson lives like that. Brian O'Neill lives like that. You can get up and around me all you want, but if you're 12 yards past the line of scrimmage and therefore, 3 yards past the quarterback and you're not affecting him at all and he can step up because he's hitching, then that's fine, right? You didn't affect anything and I won my rep. And tackles the world over live this way all the time, reliably. It looks bad on TV, but it looks like on TV, those reps where it looks like the D-line is completely past the O-line, but then they all just kind of wash up past the quarterback and then suddenly the quarterback's alone. That's by design. That is an on-purpose thing that is happening, and I think just the fact that you're watching it from the side makes it really difficult to judge just how far away that guy actually is from the quarterback. So it looks a lot worse than it actually is. And I think those are the reps that I find myself disagreeing with the public on quite a bit. That said, if you do that, you have now completely committed your hips that way, and you lose a lot of leverage, you lose a lot of flexibility, and you got to be really fast. So a fast enough 3-tech that can turn that corner and turn that into a pressure is going to get wins on you. And if they ever do that and then cut back to your inside, you are hooked. You are absolutely getting beat that way. So whenever Ingram does give up A-gap pressure to the inside, a lot of times it's because his outside got defeated. He turned himself to try to recover from that, and then you cross his face, you get him to the inside. Eric Armstead got a QB hit that way. Actually, the same thing happened to Dalton Risner in the Titans game, interestingly. So that's the pass pro angle for Ed Ingram. The other thing he likes to do is if you get that arm defeated to the outside, keep your positioning, don't move anything, keep your feet moving the way that they were supposed to, and just windmill that arm around and reset it. It's really hard to do that fast enough because these NFL guys are very fast, but you'll see that a little bit more at college and high school levels. Okay, so that's the Ed Ingram deal. He gets his outside defeated sometimes. He's reasonable at recovering it, but he does take L's that way, and that explains a lot of the L's. Probably the rep you're maddest about with Ed Ingram. That's probably why it happened. So Risner gets in. Here's the very important thing about Risner. He played Jeffrey Simmons most of the day. Okay. Ed Ingram did not get Jeffrey Simmons most of the day. I mean, he got a lot of DeForest Buckner against the Colts. So we've seen all this stuff too. We've seen him play against those good players. And I thought he actually did pretty admirably against DeForest Buckner. I think Buckner got one really good rep on him that the broadcast highlighted that became the story of the day. But I thought the whole body of work was actually pretty good for Ingram against the Colts. But Jeffrey Simmons got his against Dalton Risner. Okay. He took some L's. Risner got smoked a couple of times. It's Jeffrey Simmons. I'm not going to kill you over that, right? And that's what really stops me from coming to a strong finished conclusion. It feels like this is an unfinished study because I don't exactly know what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, you got beat, but it was by Jeffrey Simmons. That's super not fair to judge you by that. And so I want to see more. Let's see what Gervon Dexter does to you. Okay, that's a much more sensible matchup. And that'll be next week. But Risner, I guess the thing that gets him in pass pro more than anything is that when he's taking his steps, he leaves his weight a lot, and his steps can be very lopey and very long. If you think about a step cycle, right? The cycle between, your left foot getting down, picked up, put back down, right? You want your foot to be down for as much as that step cycle as possible. Because if you get caught with your weight, if you gallop, right? If you really heel click and jump and you get caught, and you accept that contact while you're in the air, you have no way to anchor. Your feet aren't on the ground. You don't want to do that. And I think that he has his feet off the ground for too much of his step cycle. I would like his steps to be shorter and choppier so that he's got his feet on the ground a little bit more. That's a very, very small nitpick. And there are people in the O-line world that would vehemently disagree with me and say, no, he's got to get his width. He's got to get his depth however he gets it, and would totally have a different approach to this. And it's perfectly valid. It turns out the world of O-line is not a monolith. Okay. That's what it is. But that gets him in trouble, and it also gets his momentum moving such that he doesn't have the ability to move back to the inside if somebody's going to cut to his inside. So he took some inside L's to Jeffrey Simmons. He also opens up his chest a lot. He comes around wide with his hands a lot, which is a hug technique thing. That's a different way that O-line have been taught. It's not the way the Vikings do it anymore, but they actually did a few years ago. But it's clearly a habit that Risner has had where he likes to bring his hands around wide and essentially put his hands on the outside of your shoulder pads and then try to control you that way. And what that does is it gives up your chest. So you have to be really good at anchoring. When he gets a jab to the chest, there's a few reps where Jeffrey Simmons just gets one hand right to his breastplate. And instead of hopping and anchoring the way he's supposed to, he kind of walks back and tries to walk back with fast enough steps that he gets his feet resynced and he can get his feet in the ground that way. And that cedes a lot of ground, but that can be okay. You can use some of the space in front of you. And that's another thing that O-line, when it comes to O-line, when it comes to pass protection, if the quarterback is 8 yards behind you, you have 8 yards of space to use, right? You can let him get 6 of those yards deep, and if you anchor up and you stop him and the ball gets off, guess what? You won your rep. Didn't have to be pretty. It's a dub. And I will tell you, I'll tell you, every O-lineman in the world, I will learn so much more from their ugly wins than from their pretty ones. It's just, that's where you see what happens when the rubber meets the road, right? What happens when things start going a little awry? Who do you become? That's how you learn about what an O-lineman's game is. And so that's Risner's favorite move, but sometimes he will get walked back too far, and then you're in the quarterback's lap and you're in the way, right? So that's the pass pro deal. To me, both of those guys have a glaring enough issue in pass pro that you can watch it on tape. And if you're a 3 tech that is preparing to go up against this guy, you're going, okay, I know how I'm going to attack him. And that's a problem. That's a problem for both of these guys. So I see it right now as very like 1-to-1, but I also don't know how much the Jeffrey Simmons of it all is warping me. And if I'm overcorrecting for it or if I'm undercorrecting for it. And so I want to wait and see what happens in the next couple of games before I really lock that in. The run game's a lot clearer. That'll be next. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Hillsdale is a Christian college in Michigan with those kinds of perspectives, and they have free online classes that you can take right now, whether you're in Michigan or not. You can take them on chemistry or on certain literature, a lot of like social studies concepts. So if that's something that you are into, if you're interested in those kinds of deals, they're online classes you can take at your own pace, quizzes, readings, etc. You can find it at hillsdale.edu/lockedon. You can enroll there. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That is at hillsdale.edu/lockedon. You can go there to register. Once again, hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Moving on here with this Dalton Risner versus Ed Ingram thing on the Locked On Vikings podcast. The run game is a lot simpler than the pass game for me. I think the pass pro is a more technical world, so I spent a little more time on that. For run game, it's not that it's not technical, but I think it's a lot more physical. It's a lot less about the wax on, wax off, and it's a little bit more about just like the weight room, right? And when it comes to that weight room thing, you can find reps of both of these guys, even just in that Titans game, there are reps of this, just because of the way that run plays work out, where they are one-on-one with the guy and they're just trying to move him, just trying to get him from point A to point B. And it's like this very clear, like unadulterated, just like very pure look at what it's a very controlled environment for what you're looking for here. And in those situations, Ed Ingram is just better. He is just stronger and he just moves guys better. In duo especially, and duo, the guard's always going to be in a double team on duo unless the front is such that it splits up the double team, which sometimes teams really want to do. But either way, you are trying to take a guy and just push him back. You're not even necessarily climbing to the linebacker unless you're super uncovered in duo. You're getting into a guy and you're just pushing him back and just trying to get a whole bunch of push. That is a play that is meant to get 4 yards in a cloud of dust, right? And if it gets any more, that means you kicked a whole bunch of ass. And guess what? The Vikings get more on duo a lot, and they kick a lot of ass a lot. So Ingram is an integral part of that. The guards are an integral part of that because they will always be, whether it's duo to the left, duo to the right, they will always be in a double team, whether it's with Bradbury or with O'Neal. And of course, Bradbury's always in a double team as well. So the tackle will be one-on-one sometimes. The tight end in duo will always be one-on-one. The guards and the center will always be in a double, which means they have to be good at doubles. Those are the key blocks there. And all season long, there have been the Vikings are good for 2 or 3 duo reps a game where they just sled guys. And like these good guys. I mean, like this happened to Dexter Lawrence, man. Like this happened to DeForest Buckner, got pushed 5-6 yards back. Like there were some really good ones. Did not get that against the Titans, really. When it was Risner's turn on the double team, one of them, he was up against James Lynch, double team versus Brian O'Neal and Dalton Risner. Risner fell over and James Lynch actually managed to flash color. And that means show a little bit of jersey to the running back. And, the running back, who's Cam Akers, he sees navy blue and he goes, crap, I got to bounce this. And he had to bounce the rep out. It actually turned into a pretty good rep because the bounce was there. But for Risner's part of it, he did not succeed. In another one-on-one situation against James Lynch, got no push at all, got his face crossed. Lynch came in and actually got half of a TFL. It just isn't as strong and it just isn't as good. It's that simple. There's not really much like technique to say to it. It's just that Ed Ingram is a very, very strong player that got him drafted in the second round. Risner is a different kind of player and got drafted in his second round for a different reason, and that's just a different thing. So if you put that together, there are other aspects of O-line play that I cover in my Patreon video that are, I would say, both guys check both boxes. For example, stunt pickups. I think both of those guys are totally fine at that. Ed Ingram, I mean, like over time, you'll get a few mistakes here and there. And I think I've seen mistakes from both of them. If you go back to last year for Risner and over time for Ingram, but at least in the games that I kind of examined, the Jags game and the Titans game, they both had really good stunt pickups. And it's like, this is not why the decision was made, right? The other, and like combo blocking, I think they're both reasonably fine at it. But in the run game for Ingram, the issue, if you want to like point out an issue with him in the run, is that because of that over aggression, sometimes he will, a combo block is a timing thing. You got to push the D tackle that you're pushing, and then you got to get up to the linebacker. If you leave too early, then and don't give enough help, then that D tackle is going to beat your teammate. If you leave too late, that linebacker is going to get around you. He leaves too late sometimes. He gives too much help, and then he's got to go up, and then the linebacker is already there. That kind of thing doesn't bother me. There's a rep against the Jags where he does exactly that. He helps on the D tackle way too much. The linebacker gets around him and ends up making the tackle. But because he destroyed the tackle, he opened up a huge lane, and Aaron Jones was able to get 7 yards on a first down run. You take that all day long, right? Like I would love it if you went up and got the linebacker. We can get into the secondary. That'd be amazing. But a 7-yard run, like opening up a hole that leads to a 7-yard run on first down, we're very, very happy with that. But conversely, I think Risner's a little better at that timing and can get up. He did a great job in the Tennessee game of getting up to the linebacker and finding exactly the right angle on a player who's faster than him and more agile than him. It's because he's a linebacker, right? So that if you're looking for something to hang your hat on for Risner in the run game, it's that. But that's not really what we're looking for, what we've been looking for schematically all year long. So we have a very clear, I think, advantage for Ed Ingram in the run game. I don't think that that's ambiguous at all. I think the pass pro one is. So right now, here's how I've been putting it. I am unconvinced. I am not going to sit here and say it was a mistake to put Risner in. Way too early to say that. Too close to call. Can't say that yet. That would be way too strong of a take. But I am unconvinced that it is the right call right now. I think Risner needs to do more. In the next couple of games, he needs to hold up a little better in pass protection. He needs to show that the way that he is setting up in pass protection, the way he's using his feet, he needs to show that it works, and that the only reason it kind of went bad against the Titans was because Jeffrey Simmons is really good. If that turns out to be the case, there is a path for Risner to sort of prove this to me. Absolutely. And to prove it to the ones that actually matter, which is the coaches who also haven't made this decision yet. So I feel like on safe ground because I feel like I'm in lockstep with the Vikings themselves, who are also like waiting to see more. So it's an unsolved problem right now. As it stands, Risner has not completed the work of proving himself. I am unconvinced. That doesn't mean I can't be convinced later, but right now I am unconvinced. But I hope that I gave you at least a sense of what I'm really looking at here. And it's not just pressure numbers. It's not just PFF grades. It's not just kind of what stands out to us on the broadcast when we watch on TV. There are very specific things that both of these players do that have an outsized impact on the game and on their individual plays. If they can overcome those, or if they can just prove that those things aren't as negatively impactful as they look, then somebody like Dalton Risner can take this job and hold on to it, and he's got every opportunity to do so. Tomorrow is Crossover Thursday. We will talk to Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, get a sense for, goodness gracious, what's going on over there in Chicago. It has been a year for them, so we'll get a sense for that. I will see you all then, and as always, Skull.